Thanks, CC. Yeah, good to be home. A couple things in the words of wisdom. It's always easy to pick out a couple platitudes, and we all write them down and maybe even put them up on the rehearsal room wall. And and I always wonder if people just read them or they soak them in or whatever. And I've been talking about what we say that's incidental or a comic relief or even a sarcastic remark to get a reaction from people. And I'm often certain that we don't think through how it goes through the lens of the person that's receiving it. We have to remember communication isn't what we say that counts. It's what people get that counts. And nobody on this screen has been guiltier of making some slide remark and everybody laughs. And then you look at the person it was aimed at, and even they're laughing, but you realize, man, I went under the fingernail on that one. I shouldn't have done it. So last week we talked about, can you keep track of just when you inadvertently say something or it's just the first thing that comes out of your mouth. Uh, and this week I'm going to ask in our words of wisdom that before we say it, we posture ourselves behind the person's eyes that's receiving it. We all laugh about have any trouble combing your hair, Tim? Oh, ha, 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 ha. Well, I wish I had hair to comb. But think about this because the elderly teachers on here who've been at it a while will tell you that, the student will come back 15 years later and said, you remembered that time you made fun of my blue shirt or something. Well, since that time, I've never purchased a blue shirt because what is just off the cuff for us is taken in as almost holy water in many cases for them. So, words of wisdom is from this week. Let's be careful of our words of wisdom. That's it, CC.
Thank you so much, Tim. I think we all have to be reminded the power of our words, especially when those young ones are looking up to us, often as the greatest, if not best, role models in their lives. That not just what we say to them, but what they hear us say to others. So thank you for that reminder, Tim. Scott, what do you have for us tonight?
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see you. Hope you had a fantastic week. My words of advice, or many times I give pedagogical tips, and I'm going to steer just a little bit different direction. But I want to start by saying this, and it has to do with student leadership. And I know a lot of us are, training our students right now. We must work passionately to develop student leaders who are exemplary role models that can lead with the heart of a teacher and who can absolutely lift others up. And great servant leaders are measured by what they give. And so these are the type of student leaders that we want to develop within our culture of excellence. With that said, and talking about our students and developing that, some of you have heard this story, and this has to do with sometimes refinding our why. My last year in the classroom, we took the students to a spring trip in New York City. And you can't go to New York City without going to a Broadway show, right? Broadway musical. And so we went to see Wicked. And matter of fact, I saw Wicked about 3 weeks ago. And I had seen it 7 or 8 times. And at the end of Wicked, in the second act, there's a song called For Good. And I was sitting there, my students were in front of me, their chaperones were sitting around me, and all of a sudden the song came on. And I heard it from the perspective of a student-teacher relationship. And it started, I've heard it said that people come into our lives for a reason, bringing something we must learn, and we are led to those who help us most to grow if we let them and help them in return. Because I knew you, I've been changed for good. Well, I had tears coming down my face, and then the second verse came. And this is a true statement. It starts out, it well may be that we will never meet again in this lifetime. And that's true. Many times when our students leave us, we don't see them. It well may be that we'll never meet again in this lifetime. So let me say before we part, so much of me is what I learned from you. You'll be with me like a handprint on my heart. Because I knew you, I've been changed for good. So I share all that to simply say that when you're having one of those days or you're having one of those weeks and we're having to fill out the seventh, bus request or whatever it is that we're having to do, find a quiet time, a quiet space, and put on the music for good and listen to it with regards to the student-teacher relationship. And it will help you connect with your why and the fact that we get the opportunity to make a difference in the life of a young person each and every day. Cece, I'm going to actually turn it over to Jonathan, hand it over to Jonathan, who's going to introduce our very, very special guest. Jonathan?
Well, thank you all very much. That was awesome, Scott. Thank you so much for getting us set up here for success. Well, tonight we're in for a treat, everyone. Jeffrey Grogan is our guest this evening. Jeffrey, we could say so many things about him. Internationally acclaimed conductor, recognized for all he's done with music education, currently director of orchestra activities at the Bass School of Music in Oklahoma City, and also directs the youth orchestra there. He's also part of an organization he's going to talk about tonight called from teachmusic.org, which he'll get into. And on a personal note, you always need somebody who has your same initials that you can look up to. And so Jeffrey Grogan is one of mine. It's not Judy Garland. It's not Jane Goodall. It's not Jeff Goldblum. It is Jeffrey Grogan. So please welcome Jeffrey Grogan.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hi, everybody. So good to see you. I have just so many friends, mentors. I see a couple of former students on here and maybe potential students that I'm so impressed with the fact that you're all here, because everybody on the screen is so incredibly busy and dedicating your life and giving your life to these students and your studies and everything that you do, and then to take time on a weekly basis or throughout the year to spend time with this amazing group of people. It must be inspiring, and just the energy that you bring to each other is inspiring me. In the setup, I can see you already have a wonderful chemistry, and it's a little intimidating to talk to you. But I just thought maybe just a very quick summary of my background. I grew up in it's not a small school anymore, it's Cedar Hill, Texas. We had a pretty small band programs, a little 3A school. And but before I started band, I saw this movie between my fourth and fifth grade year in the summer called Star Wars. And the only way I could re-experience that movie back in those days was to buy the soundtrack. So I bought the 2-record set. My parents let me get in. I would listen to it on my parents on my dad's turntable, 2 hours a night, 3 hours a night, and then I started conducting it. And the London Symphony Orchestra sounded awesome every time I conducted them. I thought, well, maybe I got a future in this. But I knew at that point kind of what I wanted to do. So I was drum major in high school and all of that, and then chose to go to Stephen F. Austin State University, where I met the amazing Brian Christian, by the way, who was much older than me, because he was a grad student when I was an undergrad. And we both, I had sort of been geared up my whole life that, I was geared towards making Texas All-State, and it was all sort of competition to me. Until a person came into my life who I know is very dear also to Brian Christian, and that's John Whitwell. And John Whitwell showed me people and music in a way that I had never experienced before. I remember his audition for the director of band's job at Stephen F. when I was there, and it was the second movement of Lincolnshire Posy, and I'd never experienced something like that. It transcended being correct, and that's sort of my life up to that point had been about being correct. So he came to SFA, and it was just this miraculous, wonderful experience. And he just loved us all so much, and took care of us, and cared about us, and brought people into our lives that also changed. And I'm thinking the first person he brought in was someone by the name of Carl St. Clair, who is at the time was Seiji Ozawa's assistant at Boston, but had grown up also in a small school in Texas, and had been a band director on the college level and flipped over to the dark side. I don't know if this is Jonathan, what's the dark side? But anyway.
We don't talk about it.
Okay. And then he started bringing more people in my life, people who became my mentors and colleagues and friends, and my former bosses like H. Robert Reynolds and Larry Ratcliffe and Don Schleicher, and I kept seeing music in the same way from all these people. There was a theme, and I hadn't planned to go to grad school, and he said, you really should look at Michigan. Mr. Reynolds is going to take students again, and I wasn't planning on it, so I did it because of him, because he said he thought I would have a good shot at making it, and I never would have thought that I could, without somebody like that in my life, and I owe so much to him. So I thought what I would talk about today, just for a few minutes, is leadership from the podium with as it relates to musicianship and artistry, because I know that teaching humans, teaching these students, having these wonderful people in front of us that are absorbing all of this, and the teamwork and all the esprit de corps that happens from ensemble work, marching band, everything else that we're all involved in. um, for us, at least for me, music is the vehicle. Music is the vehicle that helps to bring all those things. And Mr. Whitwell told me this, and all my teachers told me this, and I didn't believe it when I first started teaching public school in Texas. So after after grad school at Michigan, I came back and taught public school in Texas, 6 through 12 in DeSoto. And then Mr. Reynolds called me at the end of my second year and said, "Hey, do you want to come be the Michigan marching band director?" And so I was ripe old age of 26, and so I did it, and um, we ended up doing that for a couple of years, and then was the marching band director at Baylor as well. Then at the end of my time at Baylor, a job came open at Ithaca College. And so then I flipped to orchestra at Ithaca. And then after Ithaca for about 5 or 6 years, we moved to New York City. I was with the New Jersey Symphony for 11 seasons, had 3 amazing youth orchestras in New York City. And then this opportunity was presented to us about 7 years ago to move back with my mom and my brothers and all my little nieces and nephews here in Oklahoma City. And it's been a wonderful change of pace from New York City. But one thing that Mr. Whitwell, Mr. Reynolds, all my teachers always said is that, if a student is inspired and you go for the artistry, a lot of times a lot of the mechanics will fix themselves. And gosh, I remember beating on my students, figuratively, y'all, my first couple of years of teaching public school, and to me I got so deep into the pedagogy, and I think a lot of us do, maybe when we're first starting, because we're just trying to figure out how the craft works and everything else. And I remember a friend of mine, Gary Lewis, who also Brian knows very well, and also Mr. Reynolds, but also Mr. Whitwell, came to visit my freshman honors band at DeSoto High School. And I just remember how fast they got better so fast with these people saying these things about artistry and human experience. And Mr. Whitwell came and worked on the piece that Frank Kelly wrote in memory of his dad, Amazing Grace. And it had just been written. I mean, it was just so powerful, and for those kids to experience that. And so from that point forward, I realized that if I went for the artistry and went for the human emotion, all the things that groups just get better sometimes, and there's 90% of the stuff that I was probably going to work on before sometimes fixes itself when these kids are inspired by the music that you're making. I just want to tell you a story. You know, I do mostly all states for orchestra, but recently I was invited to do the New York All State Band, get back to my roots. And I chose Lincolnshire Posey because I hadn't conducted it in 15 years. And it was probably one of the pieces that I missed the most. And I would say most all-state experiences that I have with students and concert experiences are engaging, and we get into the music and there's an emotional connection. But this one was really special. As a matter of fact, this happened back in December, and there's still a very active group me from the students of the New York All-State Band from back in December. And I'm not sure if it was because I missed Lincolnshire Posey so much. I'm not sure if it's because I always thought Lincolnshire Posey was about the text, but really, as I kind of went back to it for the first time in years, I realized it was about the singers and their lives. And Granger says that too, you know, but I'd always heard it's all about the text. Well, it's about the singer singing the text, but about the singers' lives. So we dug into the lives of these singers, and you know, some of them have incredibly difficult stories, and somehow through all of that and discussing that with the students, the level of the ensemble just kept going off the charts. You know, and of course we'd have to fix things and line things up, and it's a huge ensemble of 160 kids, you know, and like a big Texas All-State Band. But it's something even more special than I'd ever experienced before in an All-State happened with that. And I really think I shared more with the students about those things and empathizing with the singers and knowing about the singers than I probably normally would in an All-State. Usually it's, you know, musical triage. We got to pick the A. Okay, if A is better, then this concert's going to be so much better. And then you go to B, C, D, and E, F, G, and then eventually you have to give a concert. But this time we really dug into the emotional depths of these people and these humans, and playing the recording of Fennell talking about Granger visiting him at his house, and Lord Melbourne, and him telling them the story of Lord Melbourne. And anyway, I probably shared more tears at that concert than I have in a long time. And I really think it had a lot to do with that. You all know that conducting has sort of taken off a lot in the last 15, 20, maybe 10 or 15 years. These conducting workshops come open, and they sell out in 30 minutes. It used to not be like that. And there's such a thirst for conducting, and I especially think since COVID as well, because conducting is such a great way to share how you feel about the music with your students. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that today. But before I do y'all know this book, The Art of Possibility by Benjamin Zander? So it's sort of my Bible for when things go wrong in my life. I've read it probably 200 times after I read all of Dr. Tim's books, which are also life-changing as well. This takes so many things in real life, conflict resolution, grief, and relating it to musicians and conductors and musicians. And if you've never had a chance to dig into this, you can see the top of mine. You see all those Post-it notes? I mean, I have so many stories that I use out of here. And this came at a very difficult time in my career, when I was facing a huge challenge, and it was one of the things that kept me going and saved me. And there's so many beautiful stories in here, but I'm going to summarize one of the paragraphs, and this is from Ben Zander. In our world, I find this very common in college music programs. It is dangerous to have musicians so obsessed with competition or making the mark and being correct, that this causes difficulty in taking the necessary risks to be great performers. how they have to give way to passion in order to become artists. And really, this principle applies to everyone. That's basically a summarizing of a chapter in this book. But if you think about it, sometimes it's better for grades and certain things to play it safe, right? But artistry requires risk. Um, and so he talks about that so much in this book. Those of you who've done this, I've done this clinic at Team EA and Midwest, where we've actually conducted Cadillac in the Skies by John Williams. And we actually moved to the music in a way that's completely musical and has nothing to do with telling people when to play. It's all about how to play. And um, I'm not going to do that right now because I don't want to take time, but I wish we could do that together and just think about how we move in a way that is about the how and the why and our artistic vision and our emotion and our empathy with the story or whatever. That is the only thing that comes across and not the when. With my conducting grad students, we have a seminar every week with a professional quartet and piano. And a lot of times I'll just say, okay, um, just don't conduct, and we're just going to let the ensemble go without you. And you all know you've been part of conducting workshops, you've seen this. And it's spectacular. It's so together. It's wonderful. I've done this with middle schoolers too. It's I'm thinking of a group that I worked with last year in Texas, very famous. They're so good. Oh my gosh, those students were amazing. And they were one of the honor groups, middle school, um, for Texas, and they were having trouble with this piece. And it's a full orchestra, so middle school full orchestra presents a lot of challenges that students aren't used to because the room is filled with musicians. Um, and the conductor was working really hard, and I said, I've got a crazy idea. Why don't you just step off the podium and we'll start them and let's see how it goes. Everything instantly fixed itself. Middle schoolers. It was fabulous. And so sometimes I think, we are the reason that things stay together, but really it's the pulse that keeps things together. And then we can work on other things, even with young players. And I'll say that happened with 3 or 4 different middle schools that I worked with last year. And it tightened things up because these all of a sudden became more active and they watched each other, and the antennae go out, as Mr. Whitwell used to say. So I mean, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. um, the other thing I would say about sharing passion with your students, is this empathy and gratefulness, and just in our own personal lives, but about music. Both of my grandfathers fought in World War II. And I always wondered, like, what was it like to be in those situations? What was it like if you were, on this side of the war? What was it like if you're on this side? What if you're like if you're running through a field and you're being, shot at? And so I experienced pretty early when it first came out, the Band of Brothers, which was so realistic and so powerful. And it's Spielberg and Tom Hanks, and I can't remember who all, but it was just brilliant, brilliant. Um, a brilliant way to sort of try to somehow understand what they were going through and what my grandfathers were going through. And I thought that helped my Shostakovich. I thought that really helped my Mahler. Like, I couldn't wait to get back to music after seeing certain scenes from those movies, because it helped me. But I want you to imagine this, and I'm going to play a little excerpt. Steve, did you share? Am I shareable now? It says sharing is not turned on. And now I am. Okay. This is a scene from Band of Brothers, and I want you to imagine you're a German. You're in this small German town, um, they discovered the first, you might have seen this episode, the first concentration camp. And then they show the soldiers sort of discovering this as the episode goes on. And so you have to wonder, like, what were the people, did the people know this was going on? And so this opening scene is a town that has just been bombed by the Allied forces, and it's completely destroyed. And so everyone is sort of cleaning up. And I want you to notice the very first thing that these people do in this moment. And then notice the comments at the end of this excerpt. It's very short, but there's a lot in this scene, which is filmed straight through. And again, this is from Band of Brothers.
The only one not hearing anything?
No, it doesn't look like it's been started yet.
Oh, is it still not playing?
I think
Nope.
you need to hit play.
I did. Oh, I see. I'm on the wrong thing. Sorry, y'all. Been a while since we've been back here on Zoom. Let me start it over. We even practiced at the beginning and everything. All right, let's see this one. You see it?
Yep.
Tell you one thing about the Krauts. They sure clean up good.
Yeah. All he needs is a little Mozart.
Beethoven.
Sorry, sir.
That's not Mozart. That's Beethoven.
So just a lot to think about. I mean, there's so much to unpack from that scene. And then if you watch the rest of the episode, you'll see that why. But they said Mozart, and he said, no, that's not Mozart, that's Beethoven. And that's very important too, because the music of Beethoven, just the eternal struggle and all of the things that are inside of it, but for them to choose to pick up their instruments and play after losing loved ones, losing their homes, losing everything they have. And I think music is like that to me, and probably like that to everybody in this room. That sort of power. And then somehow being able to, I usually share this video with all my students at some point, and we talk about that. And we're working on Shostakovich's 10th Symphony right now, which is just crazy. And then, all the emotion inside that, but trying to help them also empathize. Well, what was it like to live like Shostakovich and to go through those things that Shostakovich went through? So, I hope that you all get to listen to music. I know I heard Scott say something about that early on, but so powerful. I wanted to read one other quick story out of the book and then play an excerpt. And it's the story, it's a very quick story. Steve, am I good? We're good? Okay. So this is, you know what? I'm not going to read the story. I'm going to let y'all read it sometime when you read this amazing book, because it's about Mahler's life and about a little girl and her hearing Mahler's Ninth Symphony for the first time in her life as a 5-year-old. Oh, should I read it? Brian, what do you think? You're on mute.
Yeah, man, read it. It's just time.
Go for it.
It's just time.
A member of my orchestra demonstrated the miracles that can happen when you drop all your limiting assumptions about a child's interest and understanding without applying expectations of any kind. The Boston Philharmonic had scheduled a fall performance of Mahler's Ninth Symphony, and because of the extraordinary difficulty of the music, I decided to send a tape of the piece out to every member of the orchestra so they could get to know it over the summer. One of our violinists, Ann Hooper, took the tape with her. This is a while back. A tape with her to an island off the coast of Maine where she was visiting with her family and played it on her boombox. Her 5-year-old niece, Katrine, stopped to listen for a while and then asked, Annie Ann, what's this music about? Anne set out to weave a wondrous tale for the little girl, telling her a story about a wild and fearsome dragon and a beautiful princess who was locked up in a castle. For the duration of the 90-minute symphony, Anne spun her tale of the princess and her handsome prince. The following day, little Katrine asked to hear the music about the beautiful princess again. So once again, Anne put on the tape and let it run its course, only occasionally reminding Katrine of her invented storyline. When the piece was playing for the third time at Katrine's request, about halfway through, she asked, Annie Ann, what is this music really about? Anne regarded her 5-year-old niece with astonishment and then began to tell her the true story of Mahler, how sad his life was, how he'd lost 7 brothers and sisters from sickness during his childhood, so that the coffin became a regular piece of furniture in his house. She told Katrine how cruel his alcoholic father had been to him and how frightened his invalid mother was. She told her that Mahler's little daughter had died at the age of 4 and that he never really got over that loss. And then he'd been forced to quit his job at the opera house in Vienna because he was Jewish. And then just before he wrote this symphony, Anne said, Mahler was told by his doctor that he had a weak heart and only a very short time to live. So now Mahler was really saying goodbye to everything and looking back over his life. That is why so much of the music is so sad and why at the end of the piece, it dies out to nothing. It's a description of his death as he imagined it, his final breath. And went on to explain that Mahler wasn't sad all the time. He was a great lover of nature and a powerful swimmer, and he loved to walk. He had a magnificent laugh and a huge love of life. And all this is in the music too, as well as the sadness and anger about his illness and the brutality of his father. In fact, Mahler thought he should put everything in life in his symphonies so that anything that can be imagined can be heard in them if you listen carefully enough. The next day, Katrine came running up to her aunt and said, Auntie Ann, can we hear the music about the man again today? And they did. And again the next day. And in fact, Katrine's parents told me she listened to it nearly 100 times that summer. The following October, the entire family made the 4-hour drive from upstate New York to Boston to hear our performance in Jordan Hall. Katrine sat wide-eyed through the whole piece. And later she wrote me a thank you note. And there it is in 5-year-old script. It's very cute. I often read this story too to my students, especially when we're playing Mahler. But you know, and to somehow everything in those pieces, we did Mahler 1 last semester, and there's so much in that piece that they can relate to in their lives: loss, sadness, failure, all the things, you know. And there's a place, so that piece was became very close to them through all that. So I know you're all talking to your students about music, and will talk to your students about music, those of you that are going to go out there. But I don't think I do it enough, and when I do it, it makes things better. And I'm going to vow to myself after today, talking to you guys about it, that I will do it more often and have them share their experiences with me. One of the things I'll just throw out before we go into the next thing is he has a thing called white pages and he passes out a white blank sheet of paper to every kid in the group or every musician in his orchestra, and he lets them write. They can do it anonymously, and they can write notes to him. It can be about their day, it can be about the piece, it was about something that happened. If they want to share their name, they can or not, and then he takes those and he reads them and responds to them. So I haven't done it in a while, and rereading this book recently reminded me that it's a great way when we're large ensemble conductors to have a little bit more individual interaction with our students. You all are great. I feel like I blabbed on for 20 minutes. Maybe it was 30 minutes. It's probably way too long. And it's hard on Zoom too, but I love, I could see Cecilia's smile there. And but thank you for having me.
I think everybody would be happy for you to just blab on. Yes, I see so many heads shaking. Yes, indeed. What do you think about some breakout rooms? And we'll come up. I loved that last week. Y'all went into your rooms and kind of continued the conversation, but then also came up with some questions. So for those unfortunate groups that didn't get to spend time with Richard, right? You got to come up with, like, what's the hit list? If you could ask him a question, what would it be? Perhaps we can do that again. Jeff, did you have questions that you wanted to throw at us?
Well, from me,
Yeah.
I
Or
mean,
for us to discuss?
yeah, I think for me, I would just throw out, you know, what is the one thing or the two things that you want your students to take from their time with you, and how do you build that into every day? That's bigger. That's bigger than we probably have time for today. But
Tim.
Yeah, thanks, CC. Jeff, I have a question. Because I mean, the connection with the passion of the music and so forth. Talk to us about, can we do this at the very beginning when we start teaching any instrument? Is it important to connect that sound with a story or a feeling? Would you speak to that, please?
sure, many of you know the great Bob Duke in this room. I once saw him do a session for the El Sistema conference with the LA Philharmonic, and he started out with the beautiful. It was a viral YouTube video of this, I don't know, 4-year-old kid, 5-year-old kid. I think he was a little Hawaiian kid, uh, doing the ukulele with Over the Rainbow. He didn't sing the words. I don't know if y'all have seen that. I mean, it's just intoxicating. He's kind of playing the chords and kind of singing the words, and there's so much joy in him. And Bob Duke showed that video, and then he said, and then somebody, said, no, you have to do it this way, and talked about basically how we have to teach beginning instruments, right? And he talked about creating a little bit of magic every day, no matter what. And I think that's what Dr. Tim might be alluding to. And, I found working with strings actually, and Jonathan, you can amen me on this or not, but, if you change a phrasing or a shape or a color, it completely changes the way the strings technique works, even at the younger levels. And a lot of times, so yes, I begin with the end in mind when it comes to artistry, and share that vision with them from the beginning, and then we work towards that. I have people that argue with me that say you can't do that. You have to add it after you fix all the stuff.
I saw that thumbs down. Yeah, I always tell my students that it's like baking a cake without the sugar. For those folks who think that, oh, it's just the icing on top of the cake. No, it's a main ingredient for sure. Well,
Well,
Steve,
and I was
go
going
ahead,
to say,
sir.
Yoav put in there, why not both? And that, I think, Yoav, that is the point, right? That sometimes when we're fixing things, we take all the life and love and passion out of it. But there are ways to fix things with passion and inspiration. Sorry, Cecilia.
No, not at all. I see some great comments in the chat as well. Steve, I think you have the controls. So if we were to go to breakout rooms, you would have to click those buttons, sir. We were holding on for one little pearl of wisdom from Chris in our group. Sorry.
It's understandable. Chris has lots of words of wisdom.
Scott, did you want to share the question we have for Jeff?
Sure. Jeff, I have a question for you. First of all, let me say this. I spent time at New England Conservatory, and so Ben Zander and Carl St. Clair were my mentors. So I really appreciate you. That brought me, a matter of fact, I was telling Cece, like I wanted to run upstairs and get my copy of Art of Possibility, because it's upstairs. And I see Allie, you're there too, so my question is this: what strategies do you have to help students commingle musical ideas, and help students and conductor commingle musical ideas that are based on music, on them being literate? What are some strategies that you use?
So you mean not necessarily the music that they're working on?
Either way, it could be the music that they're working on or independent of the music they're working on.
Well, one of the things there were several spokes for this talk today, and one of the spokes that we didn't go down was having students actually talk or playing something they're working on, playing an excerpt of music that you're passionate about, and then asking them to actually share their thoughts about it. And I think that for me, at least in my groups, when students hear what their colleagues are feeling and saying about music is way more powerful than me pontificating on about it. And I do that especially when I do all regions, all states, those sorts of things. When I'm working with students at other places, I'll ask them, and because they're with a whole room of people, maybe they have some friends, but sometimes they're strangers, and I find that it opens up vulnerability to be able to say these things in front of students. But then students get more comfortable as they hear their colleagues do it, and then it creates this sort of sacred circle. Jaden, isn't that what James Jordan said in the Musician's Soul? And I think it was Sacred Circle. And it just becomes this special little thing that we share and we feel comfortable sharing, and it's a safe place to share about music. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking about, Scott, but that's one idea.
No, that's perfect. Yep.
Did we have any other questions from the other groups?
I have a personal question that's based on our discussion, and based on, Jeff, what you've talked about. So if you talk about the stories of music and the feelings of music, how do you get students to be a little bit vulnerable and talk about those feelings and stories and those types of things in class?
Well, I think just doing it. But I often talk to students about this, about, and leadership. And I go back to a video I watched 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, by one Dr. Tim Lautzenheiser, where he talks about the circle of comfortability and how leaders kind of start to move themselves out of that. And I can't remember if I stole this from him or not, but and he might have talked about this in the video. And Tim, you can tell me how long ago that video was made, but you tell a story about when you were three years old, you danced around naked in the front yard and you had no worries in the world. And you would just whatever. And then I remember my first middle school dance and everybody's standing around the walls, so there's this thing that happens at some point in our life where, we're trying to get back to that 3-year-old that would dance naked in front of people. And I struggle with that too, because I'm an introvert, but I've found that how to be an extrovert enough to get my point across about how I feel about music. And then I'll be exhausted at the end of that. Many of you probably are in the same boat, and then talking about these experiences, like my growth in that, like I used to not talk to people in high school. I was so bashful, and at some point that changed during high school through leadership experiences. I don't know if that helps at all, Tim.
It's a great question, Tim. And I was going to add, we have to be vulnerable ourselves. We have to model that and share that. And I know, like, my students have seen me cry on the podium a few times, and so it gives them permission to do that as well.
Sometimes I use the story about Yo-Yo Ma, and I'll just say, when he walked into the room and plays his tune, people weep. And what is it about him? And I think it's not just, his artistry is, off the planet, but it's just, everything he plays on the cello, you know what he's saying. Like, he's talking to you through the Bach cello suites or whatever he's playing, and just the way he interacts with musicians on stage. And the first, he played with New Jersey Symphony probably 3 times when I was there, and all those people in that group and him grew up together. So it was a huge love fest when he showed up. But I started talking to him, and I'm asking him a question. The first thing he does is he asking me about me, and I've heard other people say they've had the same experience, but he's just such an honest performer and music maker, and you trust him to take you places, and you become more vulnerable just by being around him. So you should get Yo-Yo Ma to come talk to your students.
Sounds
Maybe
good.
Yo-Yo Ma to come talk to all of us. Steve, can we work on that? I know, we're like, yeah.
Hey, maybe we can use Jeff's connection to
we
get
go.
Yo-Yo Ma here.
Weird thing, this kid that we studied through DVDs or whatever, he was in the South Carolina All-State that I conducted years ago. And he's now the music director of the Baltimore Symphony, and he just conducted Yo-Yo Ma last night. And he conducts all over the world. Jonathan Hayward, if you get to run across him. But he was that kid that would come up and ask you the questions about the score and conducting, and as a high school student. And you never know, right?
Wow. Well, Jeff, we are just so grateful that you accepted the invitation to spend time with us, and know that you are always now permanently and forever a part of our Slamily. So please come back again. Truly, thank you so much for sharing this time with us. And next week, we've kind of had a cameo hidden in the darkness. Amanda has been with us tonight, and we're excited to have her as our guest speaker next week. So hopefully we see everyone come back again. David, Steve, do we have any other announcements, business, things that we want to shout out? David.
Oh, I was just saying, no, we're all good. Have a great week, everybody. Quick question that you saw a couple of weeks. What's 5 minutes that you can spend each day building connection either with kids, colleagues, or parents in your program?
Maestro, would you like to wrap it up for the
Oh,
evening?
I'm sorry. I thought you were asking everybody to say, can you say it one more time? I apologize. David.
Oh, I was just saying we've, in our weekly email from Tim, we've had a graphic talking about what can you do for 5 minutes each day that's going to be intentional opportunity that you're going to utilize 5 minutes of your day to make connections with either your students, your colleagues, or your parents in your program. So that we're being intentional, even if it's 5 minutes. It's like that atomic habits idea with James Clear, right? If we start small, building connections with intentionality, what can that be in a month from now if we just focus on 5 minutes a day?
That's the answer.
It is. That is.
That we talked about it, I think maybe in our small group, that magical moment, making sure they have that every day, whether it's beginner saxophone or, your top wind ensemble at the high school level or college, that 5 minutes of magic.
Cece, you ready for me to wrap it up, kiddo? First of all, Jeff, once again, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody that's been here tonight. We always talk about, we can't wait till our ship comes in. Let me assure you, with Jeff Grogan, if you see him in here, swim out to the ship. He'll be happy to meet you. You'll have a friend for life, and he will remember you, and he will communicate with you. Don't stand on the shore and wait for him to swim to you. You swim out and get to him, and you will have a friend for life. Jeff, thank you. You were wonderful, my friends. And to all of you, thank you. Let's have a great week with good music making. What do you think?
Be well, everyone. We'll see you
Thank
next
you
week.
all.
Thank you, Jeff.